So for more reaction, we now welcome Professor Benjamin Perrin, law professor at the University of British Columbia and author of the book Overdose, Heartbreak and Hope in Canada's Opioid Crisis. He joins us from Vancouver. Professor, thank you so much for your time on this very important topic. So this certainly is a different approach. Vancouver's mayor is calling this a fundamental rethinking of drugs policy that favors healthcare over handcuffs. Your reaction?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is the start of preliminary first steps of Canada beginning to emerge from the sort of fog of war, of the global war on drugs. It's been over almost 50 years around the world of the idea that if we were to try to, criminalize people who use drugs and crack down on global supply, that would be the way to deal with this issue. That's proven to be a costly, ineffective, and deadly failure. In Canada right now, and specifically in British Columbia, we are dealing with a massive public health emergency because of the contaminated street drug supply with synthetic opioids. So drugs are illegal, and what that has meant is the criminal underworld has found new and better ways. So instead of heroin from Afghanistan, it's now synthetic lab-made fentanyl and carfentanil, which is 50 to 100 times more potent. That is what is killing people. It is now the leading cause of death in British Columbia, more than suicide, homicide, and car accidents combined.
A 3-year trial, though, sounds like quite a long experiment. Talk us through the actual risks here. Is there not a concern about a major uptick in use, particularly with people wanting to experiment now that they can?
Yeah, we looked into those kind of risks in our research, and we found that countries like Portugal, which have taken a similar approach, actually found a decrease in people's usage patterns and things like that. It is interestingly, when you sort of think about someone who's using drugs and addicted to them and threaten them with jail time, that doesn't stop them from using. In fact, when you do send them to jail, the research shows internationally they're way more likely to overdose and die. In British Columbia and Alberta, our neighboring province, between 40 and 50% of all people who overdosed and died had just been released from corrections. So, we have a huge problem here. It's a public health problem, and it needs to be treated that way. Additionally, if the risk of overdosing and dying isn't going to stop someone from trying drugs, the threat of a criminal record and going to jail for some time isn't going to make any impact either. But what the research shows does help is offering people support, helping them deal with underlying issues, and offering a safe supply, which is also something the province is doing to substitute contaminated street drugs with drugs that are of known contents and potency. Those clinical trials have been proven to reduce criminal behavior and keep people alive. So we think this is the right approach to treat this as a public health issue, rather, not as a criminal justice one.
You mentioned the underlying issues, a broader perspective. Why are people turning to drugs in the first place? What has your research told you?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. What we found is that people are 7 to 10 times more likely to develop a substance use problem if they experienced early childhood trauma. And so this is, peer-reviewed medical journal research. It means that when you look at people who are using drugs, and in our studies, we speak to people who are incarcerated, for example, and ask them about this sort of thing. And they tell us they first started using drugs at ages 11, 12, 13. We have had people overdose and die in British Columbia as young as 11 years old. And it's just tragic. And so there's coping that's being done to self-medicate the pain. And it's devastating. The other thing that is relevant here, too, is it's intergenerational. And so Canada had something called the residential school system, which led to the death and abuse of huge numbers of Indigenous people. Pope Francis recently apologized in the Vatican for that and is coming to Canada to speak further about that. The intergenerational trauma of the residential school system and colonization in Canada is a further risk factor for why Indigenous peoples are also disproportionately dying of overdose deaths. So we need to stop for a second and say, hang on, we've tried for over 100 years in Canada of criminalizing opioids. It's only made things worse. It has not helped. So we need to look at this differently and deal with root causes and treat people who use drugs with compassion and help them to get into recovery and support.
One can imagine people around the world will be watching this experiment, so to speak. Do you see this setting a precedent for other jurisdictions across Canada in the coming months and years?
So far, several other Canadian jurisdictions have applied for this exemption, including, large cities like Toronto, Montreal, and Edmonton are also in different stages of considering applying for the exemption. I think we're seeing the beginning of the end of the global war on drugs. It may take a while, but as we begin to look at the billions upon billions of dollars spent on it, and the fact that it has failed, drugs only got more potent and cheaper as we shifted from cocaine from Colombia and heroin from Afghanistan to synthetic drugs like methamphetamines and fentanyl. We are starting to see a shift. The Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police supports this measure, by the way, as well. This isn't something that they have opposed. They're actually supporting it because they know we can't prosecute our way out of addiction.
Well, it certainly has been fascinating listening to your insights. And as I said earlier, I have no doubt that the world will be watching to see this experiment unfold and to see what kind of solutions are going to be forthcoming. Professor Benjamin Perrin, law professor at the University of British Columbia and author of the book Overdose, Heartbreak and Hope in Canada's Opioid Crisis, speaking to us live from Vancouver. Thank you so much for your time. Be well.
Thank you.